on to the second part of our webinar session today. That's for the signage specification. Karl from MLS Victoria is going to show his complete expertise and with the complete experience on emergency marker signage. So, Karl, over to you.
Thank you, Ankit. Thank you, Jeff. Just in short, so I'm Karl Morrison. I'm a GIS officer at Ambulance Victoria. Similar to Jeff, I'll let people follow up on the details on this page and move on to the next slide. Our new signage guidelines have been introduced. We now have standardized formats for some of our signs. These include the integrated signs that are integrated with other signage, as well as standalone emergency marker signs. The signage can be requested through emailing the emergency markers at rapidmap.com. These signage specifications are aimed at improving detail. With these details, we actually go into not just the layout of the marker, where imagery should be positioned, but also go into the fact that we need to have clear detail. Just stop there for a minute, Ankit. Can you go back one? For some reason, my control of the session stopped. Okay, so our emergency markers are designed not just as to stand out and be noticed, but also to make sure that it's clear, decisive information, that the key points of the sign are visible to those that are reading them or using them. One of the new things that's starting to occur on some of the signs is the sponsorship capability, to have a small area within the sign itself to actually put some symbology or logo of someone who's sponsored or contributed significantly in funding the sign. This is to actually help these land managers and user groups that are trying to get these signs installed, to actually encourage some co-contribution to these signs. As such, this is a newer addition since they were added. If I go back, the first emergency marker signs were introduced in around about 2006. We've come a long way since then, and in fact the signage has evolved quite significantly. We've got quite a diverse range of different signs out in the field, as such that we need to start streamlining what is available, what is visible, and what is readable within these signs. As such, this is why we've got the new guidelines. The other thing that we're going to ask you to consider, as it's very hard to actually outline every minute detail within a guideline as to what should and should not be done, and we still want it to be open to some interpretation within some aspects. One of the things is combination signs. So signs where for value, the emergency marker is included into a signboard or into other said signage information, or retrofitted and attached to an existing signpost, or overlaid into a signboard if it had room. Sorry, someone. In this case, we've actually got a marker now. What I would like to point out with this combination marker is it's great. It's in the rest of the information, but even at around about 20 meters away, it is very hard to discern from the rest of the information and see easily. And this is just an example to consider: should it be a standalone marker, or should it be incorporated in the signboard? I'll keep moving on. Ankit, I'm going to have to get you to next slide, please. It's not working again. Yep. The other thing that we're going to ask is that, where appropriate, the emergency markers should be put on or be made out of a reflective material. As the previous stats showed, there was a significant number of emergency markers that are used in that low to poor light timelines, and some of them are actually occurring at night. And for visibility and ease of being able to identify and locate these markers, it is essential that we have them built with reflective material, so that when we're out there, they can be easily seen, spotted and identified, not just by the people needing to call 000, but also for our responding crews that may have to go out there and identify these locations, or even use them as waypoints to mark off that they've gone past this one, they're still looking for one further along. Next slide, please. Why do we need the signage guidelines? And I'll just quickly go through because we've got to keep moving. The key things that we need to be looking out for here is emergency markers need to be clearly visible. They should not be obstructed by anything for the intended area that they're meant to serve and represent within. The condition of the sign should always be maintained at a level that they are readable and easily seen. We're recommending that the signs are visible from at least 50 meters away, so that you can clearly read that unique alphanumeric reference code at a distance, because not every call is made right next to a sign. So we need to be able to see it from a distance. They need to be visible from multiple directions. Some signage, just through cost or perhaps a little bit of lack of understanding of what the intended use in the area, are only visible from one area, one tiny aspect of the area that they're in use. There needs to be some consideration that it can be seen from multiple angles. The other key thing, and having just said that, is that the marker, the unique alphanumeric marker, should not be replicated at multiple locations in a small geographic area. It's okay to have it on the back of the same post, but I would not have the same marker code 30, 40, 50 meters apart in the same area multiple times. These unique alphanumeric marker codes are unique to a position and need to remain as such. If there is a need to have a marker further along, it must be a new unique marker. Next slide, please. I don't know what's going on here, Ankit, but we've lost control of the markers. Okay. So what makes a bad marker? Well, look, this one's probably not a bad marker other than the fact that there's been foliage allowed to grow over it. So a maintenance regime, or at least an audit regime, would actually identify that some works need to be done here to make sure that it can still be clearly seen. Next slide. This one is a damaged sign to a degree, but it's also a sign that's been there for a long time. So it's actually, in relative terms, it's withstood the test of time. However, the material it's made out of is actually probably what's leading to the degrading of it at the moment. I believe it's a vinyl style sticker that is now starting to peel and deteriorate from the baseboard that it's been put on onto the post. So I suppose for future considerations, we need to consider the materials that are used within producing these emergency markers. Next slide. Again, this is the same sort of thing, weathered and deteriorating. This one's slightly different though. This one actually sits within a flood zone of a nearby watercourse. Water comes up over to this and is actually deteriorating the board that the marker was put on underneath, to the point that it becomes hard to read or distinguish clearly. So again, the materials that we use. Moving right along, the other issues that we've got here is visibility. Putting the marker down low or retrofitting it onto other signage might be appropriate because of the surrounding things that are put there nearby or in front of it. Having near bins where people stack stuff up outside of bins when bins get full means that there is a good possibility that this emergency marker will get covered up. Next slide. Our biggest problem is graffiti, tagging, etc. like that. So one of the things I'd like you to take note here is, again, an audit regime would be a good way of tracking when these signs get damaged and changed. The other thing we need to concentrate on is placement of the markers. In this case, this is a marker that is not clearly visible from the track from all angles. It's largely obstructed by a tree. Not only the size of the sign and distance from the track make it hard to discern exactly what that APL 104 is if you don't know what it is. The other information about to call 000 is hard to see. Newer signs, sometimes we're seeing now that the sign is being reduced the emergency marker, the real estate on a sign is valued for other information. There's no point investing in ESTA 000 markers if we aren't going to make them clearly visible on the scene and be able to be read from a distance. This particular one in the top right-hand corner happens to be about the size of your average mobile phone. So the chance of it being able to be noticed and read by members of the public visiting this site is very unlikely. Next slide. Again, I mentioned earlier, we shouldn't duplicate the markers. There's two things wrong with this one. There's a duplicated marker on two different signs about 50 odd meters apart. The other thing too is the other marker, which is actually true to its GPS point, is actually on the bottom of a post. All you need is one person standing there or a bike lent up against it, and it's not visible. So logical placement of that marker is probably needs to be reviewed. Next one. The other thing too is we have active markers in our computer-aided dispatch system, but for whatever reason, whether it's through updating of signs or damaged stuff, the emergency marker plates or signs go missing. We need to know where they are. Again, this comes back to that audit regime that we're going to touch on a bit later. Next slide. So what are good signage practices? Good signage practices include making sure they're at least 1.2 to 1.7 meters off the ground. As we've seen, some of the lower ones are harder to identify or at risk of being covered up. We don't want to distract users. You're going to have to go back 2 seconds there. And we don't want to distract users from seeing the sign. So in other words, placing a sign right in the middle of a walkway is not an ideal thing. Yes, it will get noticed, but there's certain things we need to observe in terms of where we place the signs, both for visibility and also for people's safety. I'll keep moving. Next one. This is a really good sign, and I'll explain this very quickly. This is a sign at Lake Epilock. This is well and beyond the size specifications that we've got in our signage document because it needs to be visible from a much bigger distance away. This one also has some of the new features in terms of, you'll see in the bottom left corner, there is also the sponsors logo on there to help encourage it. This particular sign is right next to a caravan park. And although it is an emergency marker, it's also a valuable educational tool having it that big and right next to somewhere where you're going to get visitors to the area who may or may not know what an emergency marker is, to see that every time they go out lakeside to and from the caravan park. So it's very valuable to get people familiar with it. Next slide. The other thing too is helping protect our workers on sites. This is one of the new format templates that we've got. This format actually has the white border outline to help it stand out. It's clearly visible from a roadway. This is to mark an actual gate entrance point on a water treatment plant location, which was otherwise undefinable in terms of how you get there, get into there, and then also get past the lock gate. All of that detail can be stored against this unique point. This is a sign that's perfect because it stands out. It's not integrated into other signs. It's not blended into the background of other buildings and structures around it. It is prominent, it is clearly visible, and very easy for people to see and identify. Keep moving. Trail side ones, as I said before, sometimes you don't want to be in the middle of the trail. You need to have them off to the side of the trail so that it's safe for people. The other aspect here, next slide, is to ensure that they're visible from both directions. So having a marker, this one, both those last two slides have markers visible from both sides so that you can clearly see the information. This particular one also again has, sorry, anchor back for 2 seconds, also has the sponsor at the bottom, which in this case was Rotary. And I believe that one of the emergency markers that went down in that Barwon cluster was used about 4 days after it was installed. So they are valuable, they do get used. Last but not least, our emergency markers, as emergency services, we need people to notice these signs. We need people to understand what they are. But to do that, we need to have increased visibility and we need to have increased understanding of that environment. We're hoping that the new guidelines will start that and start at least the thought process on what we should do. Thank you very much, Ankit.